The morning Camila turned 32, she made her mother's favorite breakfast blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup, the kind that came in the glass bottle her mother had always insisted on. She drove 40 minutes across Houston in early October traffic, the back seat holding a wrapped gift, a birthday card she'd already signed to Mom, with all my love, and a box of those maple-glazed donuts her father pretended not to eat but always finished by noon. She had a key. She'd always had a key. She let herself in, called out their names, and found them sitting at the dining room table with her sister, Lindsey. What she also found, what she hadn't been invited to, were the real estate documents spread open on the table. Documents with her father's signature already dried on the bottom line. Her father, Gerald Hayes, a man who had never raised his voice at Camila once in 32 years, looked at her with something she had never seen in his eyes before. Shame. We were going to call you. Her mother, Patricia, said first. She didn't stand. She didn't reach for Camila. She just pressed her hands flat against the table like she needed something to hold on to. The house Camila had grown up in. The house where she'd learned to ride a bike on the driveway and cried in the upstairs bathroom over her first heartbreak had been signed over. Not to Camila, not split between the two sisters. To Lindsey. Entirely. Camila stood in the kitchen doorway holding pancakes and maple syrup, and she listened to her mother explain it in that careful, measured voice Patricia Hayes used when she had already rehearsed what she was going to say. Lindsey had 2 children. Lindsey's husband had lost his job. Lindsey needed stability. Camila was strong. Camila had her career. Camila didn't need it the way Lindsey did. You've always been the capable one, her mother said, and somehow, impossibly, she said it like it was a compliment. Camila set the pancakes down on the counter. She didn't say anything for a long moment. She looked at Lindsey, who was studying the grain of the wooden table like it contained the answers to questions she hadn't asked. Did you know about this? Camila asked her. Lindsey looked up, and the look in her sister's eyes, not guilt exactly, but something close to guilt that had been rationalized into comfort, told Camila everything. It made sense, Lindsey said quietly. You have your condo. You have your job at the firm. We thought, Camila repeated. The word landed between them like a stone dropped into still water. She picked up her car keys. She left the pancakes on the counter. She left the gift on the table. She walked out of that house, the house that was no longer hers in any way that mattered, and she sat in her car in the driveway for exactly 4 minutes, staring at the basketball hoop her father had installed in 1998. The net long since frayed and gray. She drove home. She did not cry until she was inside her condo with the door locked behind her. And even then she cried for only 12 minutes, because Camila Hayes had always been the capable one. She called her mother that evening, hoping for something, an explanation, an apology, the sound of her mother's voice cracking with regret. Patricia answered on the 3rd ring. Camila, she said, I think it's best if you give us some space right now. This has been very hard on all of us. Hard on all of us. I think, Patricia continued, her voice lowering, turning cold and precise in that way Camila had never realized was a weapon until this exact moment, that if you can't be supportive of your family's decision, then maybe you need to examine what kind of daughter you're choosing to be. Camila hung up. 3 days later, she received a text from her mother that she would read 140 times over the following months. You're not our daughter anymore until you learn to put family first. We raised you better than this selfishness. She screenshotted it. She saved it in a folder she titled, Remember. She had no idea yet how useful that folder would become. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was the kind of silence that has weight and temperature cold, pressing. The silence of a room after something irreplaceable has been broken. Camila went to work. She drafted contracts at the architecture firm where she'd spent 7 years building a career from junior associate to project lead. She ate lunch at her desk. She answered emails. She exercised on Tuesday and Thursday evenings because her calendar told her to. She functioned the way a clock functions mechanically, correctly, and completely hollow at the center. What she hadn't anticipated was the extended reach of her family's rejection. Her aunt called in November. Not to check on Camila to explain that the holidays would be at Lindsey's this year, and that it might be easier if Camila sat them out until things settled down. Her cousin stopped responding to texts. At a birthday dinner for a mutual friend, she arrived to find Lindsey already there and watched her sister lean toward the table and say something quiet that made 3 people glance in Camila's direction and then very deliberately look away. The social architecture of her family had been quietly, efficiently restructured, and Camila had been moved to the outside. In January, she made the mistake of calling her father directly. Gerald picked up. He sounded tired in a way that went deeper than sleep. "Dad," she said, "I just want to understand. Help me understand." There was a long pause. "Your mother loves you," he said finally. "She just loves Lindsey differently. Always has. You were always okay. We never worried about you." His voice broke slightly on the last word, and she understood with a clarity that was almost surgical that in her family, being strong had meant being invisible. Being okay had meant being overlooked. Her competence had been the thing that cost her everything. "I needed you to worry about me sometimes, Dad," she said softly. He didn't have an answer for that. She stopped calling after that. By February, the loneliness had taken on a specific texture. It wasn't longing anymore. It had curdled into something darker, something with an edge. She'd lie awake at 2 a.m. and replay moments she'd previously labeled as love, her mother braiding her hair, her father teaching her to drive, and now she saw them differently. She saw the 1,000 small moments where Lindsey had been chosen first, excused first, believed first. The family vacation where Camila's opinion on the destination hadn't been asked. The graduation where her parents had left early because Lindsey's youngest had a fever. The times she'd waited for a phone call that never came. She had not imagined it. She had simply refused to see it. Then came March, and the cruelest blow. She was passed over for a promotion at the firm, a project lead position she had been told, explicitly, was hers. The new hire, a man 5 years younger with half her portfolio, was announced via company email with language that described him as bringing a fresh, dynamic perspective. She sat in the bathroom stall and read that email 3 times. Then she sat with something she had never allowed herself to sit with before. Pure, undiluted fury. Not the hot, impulsive kind. Not the kind that makes you scream or throw things. The kind that is very, very quiet. The kind that settles into the bones like cold groundwater and just stays. She drove home that night through Houston rain, windshield wipers cutting the water in slow arcs. And she thought about all the things she had given, and all the things she had never been given back. And for the first time in her life, Camila Hayes stopped being okay. She opened her phone. She opened the folder labeled Remember. She read her mother's text one more time. "You're not our daughter anymore." "All right," she said to no one, to the rain, to the dark highway ahead of her. All right. Spring came slowly to Houston that year. Camila noticed it in the way she noticed everything now carefully, deliberately, with a new and sober attention to the world. She started therapy in April, not because she was falling apart, but because she was smart enough to know that what she was carrying needed to be examined rather than suppressed. Her therapist, a quiet woman named Dr. Ellen Marsh, did not tell her revenge was wrong. She told her that anger, when acknowledged rather than buried, becomes information. She told her that grief without witness becomes poison. Camila listened to all of it. And then, in the evenings after sessions, she sat in her kitchen with a legal pad and began to write. Not a plan, not yet. First, an inventory. Every sacrifice she had made for this family, every loan she'd given Lindsey that had never been repaid. The $8,000 she'd lent her sister over 3 years for various emergencies, car repairs, a medical bill, first and last on an apartment. All verbal agreements. All forgotten. She wrote it down. Every dollar. Every date she could recall. She was not going to be impulsive. Impulsive was for people who wanted the satisfaction of reaction. Camila wanted something more durable than that. She wanted the kind of justice that was airtight, documented, and completely legal. She wanted her family to understand, in the clearest possible terms, the precise weight of what they had thrown away. She contacted an estate attorney in May not to contest the property transfer, which was legally clean, but to understand her options regarding the loan repayments. The attorney confirmed that verbal loans, if they could be substantiated through bank records and communication history, could be pursued in civil court. She pulled 2 years of bank statements. She found the transfers, every one of them. Clean digital records. She found the texts where Lindsey had asked for the money. She found one where Lindsey had written, "I'll pay you back by summer, promise. You're literally saving my life." She saved everything to a second folder. She titled it, Evidence. There were harder nights. Nights when she would be deep in spreadsheets and bank records and she would suddenly just stop, and she would feel the grief beneath the project, the raw and unguarded truth of it. She missed her mother. She missed Sunday mornings, and her mother's laugh and the smell of her parents' house in December. She missed belonging to something. She sat with it. She didn't run from it, because Dr. Marsh had taught her the difference between acting from wound and acting from wisdom. And what Camila was building was not a wound response. It was a reckoning. She also did something that surprised even herself. She began pouring everything she had into work. Not for the firm, she quietly began building a private architectural consulting practice on the side, working evenings and weekends, pulling on her network, bidding on contracts. Within 4 months, she had 3 clients. Within 6, she had enough to begin considering the option she had been too afraid to say aloud even inside her own head. She was going to leave the firm, on her terms, with something to go to. She was going to build a version of her life that had nothing in it that could be taken away by someone who loved her selectively. She was not going to disappear. She was going to make herself undeniable, and she was going to wait. In September, 13 months after the morning with the pancakes and the real estate documents, her phone rang with a number she hadn't spoken to in over a year. Her mother. She let it ring. She watched it ring. She put the phone face down on the counter and went back to her work. Not yet. The call came again in October, then twice in November. Then, in December, a text from Lindsey, the first contact her sister had made in 14 months. "Mom is sick. You should know." Camila read it. She set her phone down. She made herself a cup of coffee, stood at her kitchen window watching the neighbor's dog chase leaves in the yard below, and she examined her own reaction with the careful neutrality of a scientist. She was not glad. She wanted to be absolutely clear with herself about that, but she was not rushing, either. She texted back, "What's wrong?" Lindsey's reply came quickly, which told Camila her sister had been waiting. "Kidney disease. Stage 4. She needs a transplant. The doctors say family members are the most likely match." There it was. Camila had anticipated something. She had not known what shape it would take. She sat with this information for 3 days before she responded again. And in those 3 days, she did several things methodically. She called her attorney. She compiled and finalized the civil loan documentation, all $8,200, with a demand letter prepared and ready to file. She completed the paperwork to formally launch her own firm, Hayes Architecture Consulting, LLC. She sent her resignation letter to her current employer, effective in 30 days, with a kind of clean professionalism that gave them nothing to criticize. And she made an appointment with a nephrologist, not to offer anything, but simply to understand the medical reality clearly, because Camila Hayes did not make decisions without information. Then she called her mother. Patricia answered on the first ring. Her voice was different, thinner, stripped of its usual authority. "Camila." "Mom." "A silence?" "I need you to come," Patricia said. "The doctors say you might be a match. You're my best chance." Camila had rehearsed this moment for longer than she realized. She had imagined herself saying something devastating, a single perfect sentence that would collapse all the pretense. But sitting with the phone pressed to her ear, listening to her mother breathe in that careful, labored way, she felt the words she'd prepared dissolve. "I'll come," she said, "but we're going to talk, all of us. Honestly." She drove to her parents' house the following Saturday. Her mother was seated in the living room, diminished in a way that was difficult to absorb. Patricia Hayes had always been a woman of such rigid architecture, and illness had removed the scaffolding. Gerald sat beside her, holding her hand. Lindsey sat across from them, and she did not meet Camila's eyes when she walked in. Camila sat down. She placed a folder on the coffee table. "Before we talk about the transplant," she said evenly, "I need us to talk about something else." She opened the folder. She walked them through the loans, every transfer, every text message, every unfulfilled promise. She did it without raising her voice. She stated amounts. She stated dates. She stated the legal reality that she had already prepared a civil claim, and that Lindsey had 30 days to arrange repayment before she filed. Lindsey's face moved through several expressions in rapid succession: disbelief, anger, and then, slowly, something that looked like recognition. Her mother started to speak to reassert the old authority, and Camila simply said, "I'm not finished." And Patricia Hayes, for the first time in Camila's memory, stopped talking. Camila then looked at both her parents and said the thing she had never said in 32 years. "You made me feel like being capable meant I didn't need to be loved. I needed you to see that." Her father covered his face with his free hand. The silence in that room was the loudest thing she had ever heard. "Now," Camila said, "tell me what the doctors need from me." She was tested. She was a match. The transplant surgery was scheduled for February. In the weeks between the Saturday of reckoning and the surgery date, the family moved through a recalibration so awkward and fragile, it reminded Camila of learning to walk after an injury, every step uncertain, every movement a choice. Lindsey arranged repayment not all at once, but in a structured plan that Camila's attorney formalized into an actual document with signatures. Gerald called her every Sunday. Her mother called on Thursdays. The calls were not warm exactly, they were careful, the way conversations are careful after damage, but they were real in a way they had never been before, because they were no longer cushioned by the comfortable performance of family harmony. The surgery went well. Patricia's recovery was slow but steady. What Camila had not anticipated, the twist she had not prepared for, was what she found 3 weeks after the surgery, when her mother was home and recovering, and Camila was visiting on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Patricia was asleep. Camila was in the kitchen making tea when she found, on the counter, an open journal, her mother's. She did not read it deliberately. She only caught 3 lines before she looked away. But 3 lines were enough. "I have been so afraid she'd become me. Hard, self-sufficient, needing nothing. I pushed her away to toughen her. I see now I only taught her she wasn't worth softness." Camila stood in her mother's kitchen with a mug of cooling tea and stared at those 3 lines for a long time. She thought of all the years she had spent trying to understand her mother's distance as a verdict on her worth. And she understood now with a grief that was entirely different from anger that it had never been a verdict. It had been fear. Clumsy, destructive, unexamined fear. Her mother had loved her in the only language she knew, which was the language of "you're strong enough to survive my absence." It did not excuse it. It did not undo the house, or the text, or the 14 months of silence. But it was true, and truth, Camila had learned, doesn't require you to forgive everything. It only requires you to see clearly. She closed the journal. She finished making the tea. When her mother woke up, Camila brought it to her and sat on the edge of the bed. And they talked not about the surgery, not about the loans, not about any of it, just about small things. A memory, a song Patricia used to sing, the color of the Houston sky in winter. It was not healing, exactly. It was the beginning of the conversation they should have had 30 years ago. Camila drove home that evening through streets lit gold by street lamps, the city humming its indifferent urban song around her. And she thought about what she had done and what it had cost her and what she had gotten back. She thought about the folder labeled Remember and the folder labeled Evidence and the LLC paperwork for Hayes Architecture Consulting and the look on her father's face when she had finally said the unsayable thing out loud. She had not destroyed her family. She had forced it to become real. And she understood finally the thing about revenge, that no one tells you that the most devastating version of it is never the kind that ruins the other person. It's the kind that rebuilds you so completely that the people who dismissed you are left standing in the ruins of their own assumptions, staring at the woman they underestimated, trying to remember when exactly they lost her. She had given her mother a kidney. She had given herself back her own life. She pulled into her parking space, sat for a moment in the quiet of her car, and looked up at the lit windows of her condo, hers. Entirely, incontestably. They called her the capable one, like it was a consolation prize. She decided, finally, to make it a throne.